Good afternoon, my name's Mabey. I'm the Director of For Life Experiences here in Hampshire. We're a full-time coaching outfit. This is Tom Oliver, who works for me full-time, and we're just going to run through with you what we use to go floater fishing here at Greenridge Farm. We've been coaching for 4 years. We go out to venues all around the south coast, but we've recently taken over the running of Greenridge Farm fisheries just outside Southampton in Ampfield. And since taking over the fishery, we've just made a few small changes to the way the fisheries run to try and promote fish health, try and promote catch rates, and basically to teach best practice with inside fishing. So just to start with, we're going to look at some of the bait changes which we made at the venue. Now, it's a commercial venue. We get lots of people coming down here, ranging from youngsters so big all the way through to people 60, 70 years of age. So what we wanted to do is we don't rock the boat too much, and at the moment a lot of people bring down this stuff, which is your bog standard cheap white bread. Now, white bread doesn't have much content inside it, which is good for fish. Okay, the protein value on here is 3.5 grams per slice. And what happens is people come down to our fishery, they take sometimes 6 to 8 loads of this just for a day's fishing per person, and at the end of the day it's left on the banks to promote sort of rodents coming along. They chuck it into the lake in full slices because it can't be reused. And basically the fish aren't getting any proteins or nutrients, or very little, from this. It's like us being fed as humans on white bread all the time. So what we've done is we've said that we now, I hate to use the word banning, but we don't want people to use white bread on our fishery. And instead what we prefer people to use is either the brown bread here, which again you can buy from your local corner shop or newsagents. But if you look at the nutritional content of brown bread, the salt, the fats, the sugars and fibre and stuff, around about the same, but protein content is actually 5.6 grams. So it's a little under twice as much protein inside one slice of brown bread as you get in a slice of white bread. So it's better for our fish. And actually, if you look at the koi magazines, in the koi magazines it promotes the use of brown bread as a treat for koi carp, but don't feed your koi carp white bread. And as we know, koi carp and the carp that are inside the fisheries are very similar fish. So we want to promote the use of brown bread if people do want to use brown bread on the fishery. So what we really want to promote here at Greenridge Farm and through For Life Experiences is the use of floating trout pellet as a surface bait. It's not widely used. It's used in its bottom form for fishing paste and method balls and for loose feeding, but not many people use it on the surface, and it is a really good tactic. Now what we've got here is we've got our small 6mm pellets. Now these are excellent for getting the fish troughing. So we put these out as loose feed, the fish get up on the surface and they're trying to find the feed as they're going around. In a similar fashion that they would feed on the bottom, they're feeding on the surface but troughing these little pellets down. And then combined with those, we've got our larger ones, which are actually 11mm pellets here. And these are what we'd be putting onto the band and onto the hook. And we also introduce a few of these as free offerings as well. So by using a combination of the 2 different sizes, the fish aren't getting used to finding one size bait. There's always something a little bit different floating around on the surface, and we tend to find it lowers their guards a little bit more, allowing us to catch more fish off the surface. Also, from a sort of nutritional point of view, we know that pellets were designed to actually feed fish in fish farms. Trout pellet, hence the name, was used in trout farms to promote healthy trout, fast growing trout, good colour inside our rainbow trout that you get in the supermarkets. And this trout pellet is exactly the same. It's going to promote nice healthy fish inside our fishery and is much better for them than our white bread there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass you over to Tom. He's going to run through some of the tackle and some of the little tips and techniques that we'd use when we go floater fishing, and then we're going to go out and see if we can catch some for the cameras.
Okay, so we're just going to have a quick discussion now about the tackle that's laid out on the table here that we'll be using today, and that we use when we go off-site as well and do different styles of floater fishing. Now if I just start over on this side of the table, you can see there are floating pellets that Graham talked about before. They're the 11mm ones that we're going to be using for hook baits. Now to go with those hook baits, obviously we've got our hooks. We're going to be using these wide gape talon tip hooks by Gardner there. The reason for that is the wide gape is going to be hanging down in the water. It's going to hook the fish in the bottom of the mouth a lot easier than a smaller gaped hook. If you can imagine the fish coming up to the pellet, taking it off the surface and closing their mouth, as they close their mouth, that wide gape's going to be down by the bottom lip to hook straight in there. Also, these hooks are very light, they're very dull. The fish aren't going to see them very easily, and they're also not going to affect the buoyancy of our floater, which is very important. There's various ways that we can attach them onto the hook. We've got our super glue and our hacksaw blade there. We can saw a small slit into the dog biscuit, put a piece of super glue down the slit of the dog biscuit, and then we can glue it onto our hook. That's one way of doing it. Or we have our bait bands there, and we can double those over the hook and bait band them on either with a baiting needle or just slide them straight through onto the baiting band. As well as that, it's very important when you go floater fishing that you match your line. You see a lot of people going out onto the fisheries, they're using just their standard 10 or 12 pound main line, and they're trying to catch fish off the surface. It's not going to work. Just like a match angler would do, you need to fine tune your tackle to suit the style of fishing you're doing and scale it right down. Especially on a fishery such as this one, there's no real snags or any danger for the fish to get caught up in, so you can get away with using lighter lines. We've got some 6 pound hydroflow there from Gardner. This stuff is very thin, it's very supple, and it's the ideal hook link material to use for the floater fishing. You also get other various types that we use, such as the zig link. That's going to also be very thin and supple, and it's just going to be ideal for the presentation we're looking for fishing surface baits. To aid that with the line, we've also got 2 different types of silicone and floatant there. All you need to do with these, they're actually designed for fly fishing, for the leaders, and what they do is they help the line to float. So all you need to do is just rub a small piece between your fingers, spread it onto the line, and it's going to help your line to float. When it's windy, you're going to be able to amend your line a lot easier and see it a lot clearer in the water when it's all coiled up. We've got a carp care kit as well. Take this fishing wherever we go, whether it's river fishing, carp fishing with bite alarms and those sort of tactics, or surface fishing. If we have any damaging hook holds, we can just pop a bit of that onto their lip. It's going to stop the bacteria and stop any infection from getting in once the fish are returned into the water. Another little edge that we use when we go floater fishing is PVA. It's something that not many people think about taking with them with surface fishing. If you can imagine you're out on a 20-acre lake, it's very windy, the fish are feeding at 40 or 50 yards. You're not going to be able to cast your single free line mixer out to that distance. By using a small PVA mesh bag, attaching it to the hook, you can cast a free line bait a lot further with a small bag because it's adding the weight to your hook. And you're going to be able to get it out to where those fish are feeding, and it's going to give you a real edge. It also gives you an edge with getting the fish feeding. A lot of people will be catapulting baits, and if you're using a mixed size bait such as the 11 and the 6mm floaters we showed you earlier, if you're using a catapult, they're going to land at 2 different distances. By putting them into a PVA bag, they're all going to land at the same distance. They're going to spread out nicely in the wind, and they're going to get the fish troughing and feeding a lot better than if you just catapult them out. Another way of doing it, which we haven't got with us today because we're only on the small canal behind us, is you can spod your baits. And when we're spodding the baits or using the PVA mesh bag tactic, you can also add a little bit of oil. That oil's going to create a flat spot on the surface if it's very windy, and it's going to allow you to fish when other people won't because it's windy and they can't see their hook bait, they can't see whether the fish have taken it or not. Just by putting a little tiny drop of oil, salmon oil, bit of cooking oil even, sunflower oil from your local supermarket, it just creates that flatness on the surface and allows you to fish on when other people aren't.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the band just behind the shank of the hook there. When you're putting a bait onto the hook, a floating bait, you want it to sit on the shank of the hook rather than actually round on the top of the bend. It sits on the bend there. When it's floating, your hook's going to be upside down more or less. You want it on the shank so that when it's sitting up, the hook point is facing down. Then what we do is you take your baiting needle, put it underneath that side of the band, over the shank, underneath that side of the band, hook onto it and just double it through. Give it a little tweak. There we go. And then hopefully you should just be able to pull that nice and tight onto the shank. There we go, and it just pulls down. Lovely. And now I don't know if we can see that, but we're going to adjust it so it sits halfway down the shank, like so. And we're going to take ourselves a large pellet. hold it onto place with a thumb and just pull the band over the top of the pellet like so. Ooh. Can be a bit fiddly, sometimes takes a couple of goes to get it on there. There we go. And that's sitting nicely like that. And when that's sitting in the water, the pellet's going to be on top, the hook's sitting below there, so when a fish comes up and grabs it, actually that hook point is sort of sitting proud by its bottom lip, and it's not sitting floating up like this with a hook point facing down towards the lake bed. So that's how we want it to sit. So it's a little edge there. And the other good thing about this is that if your bait does come off, the band will actually stay in position. So all we've got to do is get a new pellet and pop it back on. Okay, now obviously we've talked about bait, we've talked about the end tackle. The other important aspect, along with your land nets and all the fish safety stuff, is your rods and your reel. Tom's touched on line whilst he was going through the end tackle there. It's important that you have your spools, a nice big spool. I've got the Daiwa tournaments here. Nice big spool, spooled up to the max with your line. So this is the 8-pound HydroFlow that we're using here. It's a nice supple line like Tom went through. So it's spooled up to the top. That's going to aid casting. And you need to have it balanced. Balanced tackle is very, very important. There's no point having a real stiff rod and using a light line. Your line's going to snap, you're going to pull out a fish. And vice versa, if you have a real floppy, flimsy rod and thick line, you know, it's not balanced. So here we've got a beautiful rod. This is made by Free Spirit. It's actually been made for us. It's FLE Floater, but it's based on a barbel rod, a big water barbel rod. It's 12 foot in length. It's 2.5 pound test curve, which is sort of a fairly light carp rod in modern day standards. But the beautiful thing about this is it's got a really fast tip action. Now that fast tip means it's got a lot of whip inside the tip. So when we're free lining today, or when we go out free lining in larger venues, we can put that little small bait to where we want it to, right on top of the fish, where they're feeding. If you've got a bait in the right place where you want to put it, you're much likely to catch fish. It sounds simple, but so many times people cast out and they think, oh, that will do, or the fish can swim and they're coming to us. It's really important that you've got tackle that will get your bait out there. So again, it's a 2.5 pound test curve rod, nice fast tip action, quite not soft. It's got some grunt in the buck section here, but it's forgiving, and that's important with the light lines. You don't want to have something that's got a real stiff backbone to it, because once the fish reaches test curve on your rod, you don't want your line snapping. So 8-pound line, nice large spooled reel, 2.5 pound test curve rod, and we're set to go. Now, as mentioned, for the main line, we've got 8-pound HydroFlow here as the main line, but like Tom said earlier on, we're actually going to use a tactic which is used in match fishing a lot, which is using a lighter hook link. So here we've got around about 3 foot in length of 6-pound hook link material. Now, very, very simple to attach this on. It's just a loop to loop. So you tie an overhand loop, figure of 8 loop in your main line, one on your hook link material, pass one through the other, put your hook back through, and you attach your line together like so. Down on the end, we've got our wide gate talon tip hook out at sharp, and there you go, that's the business end. And to be honest, I prefer using a nice simple knot. I use a blood knot, 8-turn blood knot for tying on my hooks in this situation here. There are other knots out there that people can use. I tend to find that a well tied 8-turn blood knot, I don't have any problems with it, but a grinner Palomar knot equally is good. So there you go, that's the business end, and I think we're about ready to go and catch some carp.